All right, it's always a good sign when you have to get more chairs to fill up the room. I love it. So, hey, thanks all for coming. It's great to see all the energy around Bobwhite, something I'm passionate about. I grew up in Texas and went to the public hunting lands, and the brochures said that there were quail there. So we wandered around for weeks and weeks chasing birds and never found quail. They were gone. So it's always been something that it just grabbed a hold of me, the whole idea of pointers and a dog that could smell a bird without seeing it. And the whole concept just really grabbed a hold of me. So I got here, I was in California for a long time, got here and I was like, oh, there's quail, but they're in trouble. And so I'll introduce myself, Luke Macaulay, Wildlife Management Specialist for University of Maryland Extension. I do adult education like this, all about all different types of wildlife. I do a lot for crop damage. If you've got any farmers here, crop damage, I made a lot of relationships by helping farmers with that issue. But my passion really lies in helping with conservation, not only for bobwhites, but all biodiversity, songbirds and everything else. We all love to see a lot of diversity on the landscape. So let's get started. So I thought it would be good. I think a good thing I like to share is a broad, high-level landscape scale view of like, what can we do in the big picture to make this even possible? So that's the focus of this talk. Okay, so let's dive in. Oh, and it's working, great. All right, technology's back. So what happened to quail? Here's the outline, I'll guide you through it so you know how fast before I'm done. All right, key habitat components, talk about just broad level things. And then we'll talk at a broad scale, landscape scale, like issues to make the landscape more friendly for bobwhites. And that includes about 3 or 4 different types of landscapes. So grasslands, hay fields, crops, and probably the most important is forest. So these are the population trends of Maryland bird guilds from 1966 to 2022. The birders keep great data. And so I'll walk you through what all this means. But if red's bad, green is good. But these are 4 different types. They call them guilds of birds. So groups of birds that are grassland birds, successional or scrub birds, wetland birds, and woodland birds. And so we compiled them all together, and the percentages of this bar shows the percentage of those birds in that guild that are declining. Gray is they've stayed the same over the last 40, 50 years, and green is increasing. So you can quickly at a glance see our grassland birds as a guild have declined far more than any other birds. Our successional scrub come up enviably in the 2nd place. Wetland have done pretty good. They're about half have gained, half have lost. And our forest birds, or woodland birds, have on the whole done better. So this is kind of a big picture from the Maryland Breeding Bird Survey data. If you break this down by species, and we look at each different bird, the longer that bar, the worse they've done. So this is a 9% decline every year for 40 years, which means they are pretty much maybe a 0.5% of what they used to be. They've been extirpated, I think, probably from most parts of Maryland. I'm still on the search for them in southern Maryland. Would love to find some wild birds still here. I'm starting to think maybe they're gone. But they're still hanging on. There are wild populations hanging on the eastern shore, and we're working hard to get them back. And get populations back so we can actually, the way you can recover them and trap and release is trapping wild birds. The pen-raised birds just don't have the street smarts to survive. So, but our #1 bird declining here is the northern bobwhite, variety of grassland sparrows, eastern meadowlarks, prairie warblers, whippoorwills. We used to have whippoorwills around. Maybe some of you grew up and heard whippoorwills. They're gone from a lot of the area. And all these, on this color chart, all these ones that are in green, 9 of the top 10 like or require grassland or scrub type of habitat. So these birds are telling us something. They're an indicator for what's happening on the landscape. And I like to bring us all back to the 4th grade science class of, we have this nutrition pyramid. This is called a trophic pyramid, an energy pyramid. And really all of wildlife really depends on the sun coming down and hitting the vegetation. That's the base of the pyramid. So even though I'm a wildlife guy, I'm really a plant guy because plants sort of drive the whole thing. So a lot of this talks to me about plants and what's growing. This model is a model called the successional model of forest development. So the out here on the eastern coast, eastern half of the US, where it's wetter, if you have a catastrophic fire, you have a hurricane, you have farming, you have tilling, you will start here with bare ground. And within a couple of years, you'll start having grasses and weeds. And 3 or 4 years, you start having small shrubs. And you move on up, and over the course of 5, 10, 20 years, you start moving into a forest. This happens very quickly around here. And before you know it, a field that's left fallow will become a forest. And what happens, and ecologically, what used to happen on our landscape is some form of disturbance would lead this forest to come back and reset this process, so we would have a diversity of types of age structure and habitat structures on the landscape. What were those disturbances? Historically, probably fire was the biggest natural disturbance. Tree ring records show fire was moving through here every 4 to 6 years across most of Maryland. So we'd have big fires roll through and it would change the landscape. We'll have more on that on our next talk. Disease, logging used to do this, plowing, mowing, grazing, all these different things would have helped to serve to pull this back and start this process over again. So this is a model of succession. And when we talk about early successional habitat or early successional vegetation, we're talking about stuff right in this early area of grasslands up into the shrubland area. And bobwhites end up liking everything from the right after the fire till maybe about 5 years after something's been fallowed. Starts to age out, it gets too thick, and it's not great habitat. This is another model of the same thing, just showing for a whole diversity of birds where this whole thing fits. So it's another model where you have these grasses and shrubs and mature forests. And here again, our bobwhites are hanging out in this sort of early successional stage. So what happened to bobwhite quail? Well, if you grabbed a copy of this guide right here, let me borrow this real quick for a second. Grab one if you want. I published this last year. On the front of it, we got 11 reasons of the things that we know probably contributed to their decline. I added a 12th down here because I think there's this unknown. Is there some sort of disease issue? You know, avian influenza. A lot of birds could die in the woods. We never know it. But a lot of different things. We'll talk a little bit about how we can adjust these things in the landscape. But you can read more about each of them in that guide. So we know we've got a problem. We know they disappeared. So, well, what are the key habitat components they need? I was digging through this last night. I always try to improve my talks and make them better each time. So I've given this talk a couple times, but it's new and different each time. So, oh my gosh, I started reading all these studies from Missouri to, I think, Florida and something from Ohio. And gosh, you start reading, it's like, this study says, get rid of closed canopy hardwoods. They are not doing well in closed canopy hardwoods. We have a lot of that here. We have a lot of closed canopy softwoods, like pines, too. This one talked about the importance of woody cover in Ohio during the winter. It's like, well, geez, what's going on? I'm like reading this thing, like, get rid of the trees. Hold on, you need trees. This one talks about fire and grazing combined being the best place where they found bobwhites going in. But then they also found they really liked shrub cover, and they also liked agricultural areas. So you have a lot of different mixed things, and these are a lot of different areas. But what I came to come to share with you guys is, I think just like just like we are individuals, deer have different preferences. Each individual animal sometimes will have its preferences for where it wants to bed. I think there's some variation with bobwhites themselves about what types of areas they like. But generally, we're going to get to the main core habitat, which is these three things. And some people will call this a rule of thirds. We're going to hear this from Kyle as well, who'll reinforce this. But really, a lot of times we call them grassland birds, but it's a misnomer. They're wildflower and shrubland birds. Wildflowers, and they do need some grasses. But grasses I've actually made the grass a little bit smaller here, because oftentimes we have too much grass. We want more wildflowers. And they need these shrubs. That's stuff to keep the snow off the ground when it gets to wintertime, and to hide out from the hawks. The aerial predators are #1 killer of these guys, so they need somewhere to hide. And I have this thing here that says, with bare ground. If you look at the base of a wildflower field, if you part it down and get down to the ground level, you'll see there is a space in which animals can move around. If you go to a grass field and you dig down, there's nowhere for anything to move. So it's almost like a wildflower field. I like to think of it as almost like a mini forest, where things are able to walk through these stems of wildflowers versus a grass where it's thick. So the bobwhite chicks are about this big, and they need to they're ground-moving birds, so they need to be able to move around and peck and eat food and insects. So this is what they need. This is a pie graph of the Maryland landscape cover, what we have in the state of Maryland. And we have about 44% of our land cover is forested. The next biggest one is cropland, 17%. Next is turf grass. We have a lot of turf grass. Developed, pasture and hay, wetlands in blue, and here in red, natural succession, which we call early successional vegetation communities. So this is what they need, early successional. This is what they have. So we got a lot of work to do. But I think there's a lot of opportunities. So I'm going to hammer this down a little bit more. So that diverse mix of wildflowers and forbs. I have this picture here because I think this is just a great image. This is a bunch grass. They're native bunch grasses, not cool season fescue. Doesn't create that sod, and they nest in these bunches at the base of these little bunch grasses. They'll put a little nest in there. Wildflowers, some tall structure and tall. This is late bone set growing here, and so they need to be able to move around and raise their chicks. And if you look in here, there are little areas. If you were live in person, there's little areas that's bare underneath and between these plants. You need these dispersed native bunch grasses that I was showing you. That's where they nest. And then that thick shrubby cover, brambles, stuff you never want to walk through, stuff that sometimes people think, I want to bush hog that and make it clean. That's the kind of stuff we really need a lot of, especially in the wintertime. Gives them a place to escape from predators and for thermal relief, warmth in the winter, and cool in the summer. And then that bare ground component. And this is just a couple of satellite images of some places in Maryland and Delaware where we have a lot of areas. If you pull up Google Maps, you have a lot of areas that's like full closed canopy forest. Or some places where it's more open, it's closed canopy forest and then crop. So there's nothing really in between. This is on the eastern shore, and you see again this flat grassland or cropland. It goes straight to 100-foot tall trees. So there's no in between in there. This is an example of maybe something that's a little bit closer. This is in development that has that structure. You see there's grasses, there's shrubs, there's places where things can hide, there's seeds coming down on the ground. Still have these tall trees. Ideally, we're going to work to try and get rid of these trees. We're trying to make this ideal bobwhite habitat. We're going to remove trees. But trees can work too. Forested environments. This is at Nassawango, and it's a Nature Conservancy property on the eastern shore. And they've thinned their forests. And you can see in the forest, you have a very thick understory, and birds are using this now. They're calling from this forested area. So you can still have a savanna or woodland habitat that'll work. Here's a more open example where you have a lot of vegetation and that early successional grassland. This is a Laddie Hoax property over in Delaware. Great guy. If you want to learn about deer management, talk to Laddie. He'll share a lot of tricks with you. So those are the key habitat components. Now, what can we do on the big landscape scale land covers to try and make some modifications to help them? I try to do really practical things so people can sort of move around the edges and help make this work. So we'll start with grasslands. So there's not a lot of grasslands out there, but if you got them, we'll talk about best practices for grasslands. A lot of times you might look at this and say, well, that's a grassland. And this is actually in a conservation program, but this is a non-native exotic fescue, and it's that sod-forming grass, and it doesn't really serve much habitat. There's no seeds in there. There's no cover from hawks. If there's a quail sitting out there, he's dinner soon. Again, I drive around. This is Anne Arundel County. A lot of areas of solid grass. I like grass. It's pretty. It's green, but it's not quail habitat. And then you can get, so this is exotic, that non-native grass, and it's grown up, so it's a little bit better. It's somewhat could be used. This is native grass, but you also have an issue of sometimes there's just too much grass. So that native warm season grass could be used, not ideal. Too thick, nowhere that those chicks could run in that grassland area. So I oftentimes say grassland is a misnomer. Maybe we should be talking about a forb land. A forb is just a fancy word for a wildflower, a broadleaf plant. So we really want to have more of a wildflower shrub forb land instead of grassland. And this is a planting we did at Y Research and Education Center over on Queen Anne County. So shrubs. So we got grassland. Also talk about shrubs, hedgerows, and predator escape. I like to show some examples and pictures. It's pretty good. I feel like if there were quail, this is the kind of place where quail will be hanging out. They're not. They're extirpated from Calvert County, I think. And this is where I took this picture. But you have these sort of native grasses. You have forbs and flowers growing. You have this shrubland stuff, this messy stuff in the background. This is Nanticoke Wildlife Management Area over on the Eastern Shore. They have wild quail there. If you want to see them, you can go there and see wild quail. But you see it's native grasslands interspersed eastern red cedars. They grow easy. They provide really good habitat for that winter cover and escape cover from hawks. And I was in Kansas, and Eddie Beck, the previous president of Quail Forever, local chapter, he took me out in Kansas, and we found quail among interspersed red cedars like this. You can create these shrubs if you want something fast. You can, if you have hedgerows or with trees in them, you can just fell the trees and leave the tops, create instant shrubby habitat like this. This is Tom Fisher, John Long and Tom Fisher. They're over near Nanticoke, WMA. They've done great work. They've got quail. You can see this open grassland, scattered trees in the background. This is their farm in the winter. This is a big bramble thicket. Don't want to walk through this, you'll get thorns all through your legs. That's where we found the quail. So there are, to manage these fields, because they grow up into forests very quickly, 4 main tools. And I like to share all the tools in the toolbox, but tree encroachment's the biggest thing, and so we just need to return disturbance to the landscape. Historically, that would have been fire, and we're going to hear a lot about fire. Herbicide's a form of disturbance. It can help set back trees as well. Disking helps too, and grazing. We don't have a lot of work on grazing yet, but I want to get more going on grazing because I think that can also help maintain these grasslands as they graze out some of these plants. You notice mowing is not on this list. Sometimes mowing can sometimes really promote more grasses. You'll find in a grass field, if you mow, we have a field that was mowed and one that wasn't. The one that was mowed one time, it's all grass dominant. The other areas have like wildflowers and forbs. So the mowing, it's acceptable. If you don't have anything else, it can work. But it creates a thatch in the ground, tends to promote more grasses. So what can you do to reduce grass dominance? There are grass selective herbicides, and you can also kill these exotic cool season grasses in the dormant season, November to March. You can spray them with Roundup, and you won't kill any of your preferred wildflowers because they're all dormant, they're in seeds, their seeds are on the ground, it's safe. Disking is another tool. It helps, if you can disc in the late winter, January, February, March. February, March is a great time. Helps to promote more forbs in the ground and set back some of those trees. Kyle's going to talk a lot about fire. They've been nicknamed the Firebird. Herbert Stoddard nicknamed the quail the Firebird. And it's a great tool to learn about, and Kyle's going to speak to us a little bit more. We have a new prescribed burn association in Maryland to enhance education and implementation of fire on the ground. So contact me, Kyle, and others who are working on that. Why is fire so good? Like, well, gosh, fire is kind of scary, maybe you can escape. A lot of little things. One thing is it does have a slight fertilization effect. So when you burn, it increases the pH a little bit. pH helps plants grow. A little bit extra nitrogen availability. It's not a lot. But really, I think the big effect is removing the thatch so that new plants can grow up from the soil seed bank. And you get quick regeneration. This is just a few days after, maybe a week or two after a fire. They also help to create a diverse vegetation structure. So if you're burning, not everything burns at the same heat, and not everything will even burn at all. There'll be a wet patch and it won't burn. So over the course of many years, you're trying to burn this field, you might have different types of areas where it's been burned 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, or even 4 times, and that leads to a lot of different heterogeneity or structure on the landscape. I'd like to share a little calendar. I need to work on this slide, but basically, just like to walk through like things you could do over the course of a year to help out with bobwhites. In fact, January, February, March, you can do some disking, that early season disking. If you do it later, you tend to get more grasses. Prescribed fire is great in this dormant season, right before April 15th. April 15th is mark, where a lot of birds start coming in and they start building nests. So if you burn after April 15th, probably going to torch some nests. So we tend to like to allow the nests to come up. So you can do them later, won't kill everything, but try to avoid it then. Try not to mow during that nesting season. So April 15th to July 15th, those fields are going wild and crazy. But there's probably if there's quail, not only quail nests, but turkey nests. A lot of turkey nests get mowed up every year. So during that window. If you can wait till July 15th, you're going to have most of your birds out of there. Or they'll be big enough that they can run away. And in the winter, also, a lot of CRP ground will not allow you to mow until August 15th. So a lot of people go out and start mowing August 15th. You can leave a lot of vegetation over the winter. So I think one thing to think about is not mowing. So you have tall grass on the ground. I like to talk about it as like a warm blanket for wildlife over the course of the winter. So if you mow right before it gets cold, then there's just nothing left. And those cold winds start rolling through and the snow comes in. There's nowhere for rabbits or anything else to hide. Oh, hit the wrong button. Saved. Hayfields. Hayfield best practices. So anybody here do any hay? Know people hay? Well, I'll just share a little bit about hay. We'll run through this. I saw some heads up. All right, cool. So they are grassland nests. There's not only quail nesting in grasslands, but a whole lot of other birds, meadowlarks and grasshopper sparrows. And haying can be tough because the best time to cut is right during that nesting season. So if you mow over the top of that, it oftentimes results in that loss of that nest. The Virginia Working Landscapes has this great calendar where they have that again, I want to reinforce that May to July 1st period. If you gotta narrow it even more, April 15th, they'll start nesting. You can get away as late as May. They'll re-nest. But up to July 1st, I say 2/3 of the birds are out by that point. So you can hold off on those 2 months, which is tough. It's not economically the best thing to do, but you can save a lot of birds that way. Raising the blade, again, not economically necessarily the best thing, but there are box turtles and all sorts of other things under there too, so you can help reduce mortalities. There's a reason why you always see crows and vultures in the hayfield after the cut happens. So there's a whole list of techniques. We got a publication I'm working on that will go through in a lot of detail on this, but I'll make this available to all you guys afterwards, so you don't have to write all this down, but there's a lot of little things you can tweak, try and make it a little bit better. Crops. So crops are a big part of our landscape. And I think about what are some quail-friendly farming techniques you can do that aren't going to kill your farmer. You know, a lot of people want to have a good relationship with their farmer. They might have a lease. They might need the income, might be farming themselves. So one thing, Jason just mentioned the field border program. Gosh, I wish we had gotten the state buffer program because that sounds like a good deal versus CRP. Anyways, I'm gonna have to hit you up for that. But anyways, you can get paid to put these edges around this field into native grasslands, either through federal programs or state programs. You can leave unproductive areas fallow. This is an area where the farmers, I was looking for, this is at the Y Research Station and over in Queen Anne's. And there was an area down here which was low-lying, it flooded, and deer would always destroy the crops here. So when I was asking for where I could do research, they were like, oh, I got a spot for you. You can go right there. So it's just like total junk land, right? The farmers didn't mind. Well, guess what? That's a great place to put habitat in. These unproductive areas, leave them go fallow, and then manage them as native habitat. Cover crops can, I think, provide a lot of winter cover, food resources and things like that. So I think those are a benefit. We're seeing, like in those studies I showed earlier, there's a lot of sort of positive things with agriculture. If you really want to help wildlife, you can leave some crop behind. It's expensive. I'm thinking about doing it on a farm. It's expensive because my farmer's like, I'll do it for you if you pay me whatever the yield would be. I'm like, oh, that's like $400 an acre. That's a lot of money. Adds up. Maybe more. But it's something you can do. Leaving that crop behind not only gives them food, but also some cover. And if you go organic, that's probably maybe a really great thing. It's not a lot of people doing organic, but if you are, it's probably got a lot of weeds around. It's great habitat. And it's something I'm working with. We're going to have a talk on this at a webinar with an entomologist to come talk about what are the best ways in which you can manage insects in a targeted way, and you're not going to kill all the insects and all the beneficial insects, because those quail chicks once they become adults, quail are eating seeds. But when they're chicks, they need to grow fast. They need protein, and those insects are high protein nuggets. So spraying broad spectrum insecticides kind of wipes out all the food resources in a crop field. So I did not even, wasn't fully, there's a lot on this topic, but I will say, I didn't realize, like, I asked an extension agent how many farmers he thought were putting like a pyrethroid insecticide in the tank. And he says, well, it's so cheap, it's only like $2 an acre to throw the bottle in. And he said, I guess probably half. I was like, oh man. So there could be a lot, and this will kill all insects, spiders, ticks, everything. Grasshoppers for about 2 to 4 weeks. So not permanent, but it will kill. It's going to impact your chick survival. So we're going to make sure, I'm working my farm, make sure, hey, please don't spray insecticides. Now there's a lot of other insecticides that come coated on the seed and age stand of forest across our whole landscape. So we had a bunch of clearing 60 to 100 years ago, and now it's all grown back. So now it's all about the same age. This isn't great because a lot of birds need different ages of trees. And I heard something the other day that said small trees need hugs too. Young trees need hugs too. So if you're a tree hugger, I'm a tree hugger every once in a while, but like those little ones need it too. So looking at how we can get diversity in our age class in our forests is going to be a huge thing for Maryland. This is what a lot of our forests look like. You may have seen something like this. You walk in the forest and there's zero. This is in winter, okay, but there's not a lot in the summer either. You can walk right through there, no ticks. You don't have to worry about getting a tick. There's no blueberries growing in there. There's no sun getting under the ground. This was a recently harvested forest. I think a recently harvested forest. It was timbered, I think, about maybe 15 years before. And you can see, even though it's a forest, you have all this stuff in the understory. Quail, they don't want a closed forest, but they're not going to die by going in a closed forest like this. They've got cover. And your turkeys are going to love it. And you've got tons more deer food. And you got a whole lot of other wildlife that are going to need this. There's a lot of effort to do tree plantings, but the tree plantings are going to last about 5 years, and it's no longer going to be quail habitat. This kind of bums me out because this was a open grassland area, probably 5 miles. There wasn't a grassland for 5 miles, and it's fully planted in with trees. So it kind of bummed me out because it's just such a rare thing on the landscape, right? And so we've got a lot of forest, and it's just going to become more forest. On top of that, a lot of times best practice is to mow this, so they're mowing in the nesting season. If there was anything there, it's got a hard time because it's getting mowed. If they're nesting in there, they're going to get hammered. So I'm an early successional vegetation guy. I'm a quail guy, so I'm kind of not so much a tree guy, or I'm all about like managing for diverse forests. Here's an example of a forest, what you could think about, like a different way of thinking about a forest. A savanna, open woodland, space between the canopy. This is what we call a hard edge. Again, I showed that earlier, the farm field straight up to trees. So what you could do is basically try and push that edge back, and we call this edge feathering, and create away from the farm fields some of this early successional vegetation. You can manage this in a lot of different ways. That's going to also help your crops because those trees, when they're hanging over the field like that, they're shading and their roots are sucking moisture from the crop. So it's also going to benefit the farmer in some ways. You can kill trees in a variety of different methods. This is probably one of the easiest way to kill a tree is you can wound it in a method called hack and squirt. That's a legit thing. That's like a legit practice. Anybody ever heard of hack and squirt before? Yeah, all right, we got some hack and squirt people. So you can also girdle and squirt. But targeted herbicide only hits an individual tree. Very, very precision type of approach. And you can pick your trees. You can diversify and pick the low-value trees and take out those. Another thing, oh my gosh, I'm gonna wrap this up soon, guys. A lot of our forests, this is at Point Pleasant Farm, a farm I'm managing over on the Eastern Shore near St. Michael's. You can see right through the trees, right through there. So the deer are also eating out that understory. So ground nesting birds, ground dwelling birds have nowhere to hide in there. So it makes it a lot harder for them to use this. It's not their preferred habitat anyways, but it's really bad when it's fully eaten out. And timber harvests recover really quickly. They left a few trees behind, but this is they probably harvested 90% of the trees in here. And this red stuff is devil's walking stick, which is about to bloom right now, which just like brings in crazy butterflies, like crazy insects. I mean, just all this diversity is coming in the year after a harvest. So I try to like normalize timber harvest as a tool in the toolbox for diversity in our landscape. All right, wrapping it all up. 4 key components of quail habitat: forbs, native grasses, shrubby cover, and that bare ground thing. Disturbance in our grasslands needed. You can use herbicide, fire, disking, grazing. In our hay fields, you could delay your cutting, try and avoid that May 1st to July 1st. Raise the blade, rotate your cutting, leave some areas uncut. cropland management, field borders, you get paid to do that. Sometimes paid better than your farmer will pay you, it's true. Cover crops, leave your unproductive areas fallow. Prairie strips, reduce or avoid those insecticides as much as you can. And finally, our forest management, avoid the tree plantings. Sorry, I know there's a lot of efforts to plant trees. Thin trees, edge feathering, harvest deer, and recover your understory. If you want a guide on all this stuff, my role model is Craig Harper. He's at University of Tennessee. He's done everything I want to do, but he's already done it all. But he's at the end of his career, so now I've got to fill his shoes. But he's got a great book called Managing Early Successional Plant Communities for Wildlife in the Eastern U.S. Great guide. Highly recommend it. And with that, I want to open up for questions. Many of you you're going to be on my email list if you registered, but I'll add you to my email list. This is how you can join up. Happy to take any questions. Yeah. Thanks.
I wanted to ask you a question. We talked about hawk and predators, quail. We didn't talk much about fox. I think that's a big one. This, I mean, here you can always get rid of predators.
Yeah.
You can.
Yeah.
So where do fox fall?
Yeah, I saw one of those research presentations I was looking through last night did talk about foxes being a pretty big predator. The number one, one study recently, number one issue is one thing a lot of people might not be thinking about is the issue about nest predation. So raccoons and snakes, black snakes are the biggest nest predators down in Florida in a study. Your foxes, they can have an impact. So, but I think the raccoons are probably, if I was to look at a whole predator scene, I would be probably targeting raccoons first, and then as a nest predator. But yeah, I know folks who have increasingly, there are studies that have shown also that predator management, trapping, can improve survival of quail. It's not a lot. You need your habitat too. You can't just kill the predators. They're not going to make it either, but it can help. Yeah. Used to be a lot of trapping out here, and now there's not a lot. So, any other questions?
Yeah,
Online.
Yeah.
You're dead on with the predators. My personal opinion, having 2 farms, been hunting when I was a kid, now I just love seeing wildlife. My hedgerows, I used to have tall trees that were like weed trees that just start growing. Hawks would just sit up there. And since we don't have any more birds, I mean, I know we do that for sure, I've seen. But I like to chase the rabbits, right? You can get some exercise watching. And one thing I've done is along all my hedgerows, and the farmers love me for it because just like you said, it has so much cover there. Their corn can't grow. I've just had a big backhoe just come knock them down and just lay them on top. And I've released quails because I love, having German short hairs and all kinds of chasing stuff. They survive. The worst part is when we had a really, really bad snow. That was hard on. But when I did that, even on my woods, what I did was I cut some way down at the bottom, then I did some selective, and then I let the top. And what happened is the sun got in, and you had lots of deer, lots of rabbits, lots of turkeys, and everybody always wanted to hunt that area because that's if you can just sit there like most hunters are, they just sit, you keep quiet, you watch, you learn so much. And I'm lucky enough to be on a couple of farms. Raccoons, skunks, possums. I hate to say this, but cats. My first year, I took care of 36 cats. Watch them carry baby rabbits, all kinds of stuff like that. We just have too many predators. And I honestly believe that even if we didn't have the proper, cover, let's say we had 0 predators, I bet you we'd have pheasants and quail.
Yeah.
I wanted to share that with you guys.
Yeah.
You haven't down to the trees that produce nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's only so many. Yeah. The aerial predators you're limited on. So nothing you can do about hawks. But the best thing you can do for them is provide aerial cover so that the shrubby habitat, tall, diverse, basically a canopy over the top so they can't see the birds and reduce perches. All the studies also consistently showed that quail survived better the farther they were from trees. So removing those trees tended to help. Yeah.
I real quick give you a microphone so that people online can hear these too.
Oh, sorry, I should be repeating the question. Sorry about that, guys.
You can just hold it up too. You hold it.
Will that work if I do that?
You can just hold it.
Here, that work?
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to share with you, we have some data for you.
Huh.
Yeah, we have, because we've had this farm since 1949. And I had the pleasure of being the farm chairman back in the about 1990, that area. Prior to that time, and when I took it over, there were 3 coveys of quail on this property. That would have been about 1985, 1987, somewhere around there. In the 1990s, I became the farm chairman, and then we only had 2 coveys of quail. So I called the Department of Natural Resources. I'm going to bring the big guns in, right? We're going to fix this right up, right? Paul Pedito came out. You ever heard that name?
Yep.
Yeah, look at your hunting license. He's the guy, he's the signature on everybody's hunting license, right? Paul was a technician at that time, full of enthusiasm, and he goes, "I'm good at this. I'm good. Habitat restoration. That's what I do. We're gonna fix you right up." He said, I'm gonna make you a 2-year plan." Fantastic. Let's do it, right? The first thing we did was, he says, "You need some forest buffers," right? He says, "You're like you showed up there. You're a hard edge. That's not good. So we're going to gradually go from a forest, and we're going to go out with some forbs, and we're going to make some nesting areas." Not only that, he says, "We're going to zigzag that area so a fox just can't look down like a bowling alley, right? We'll make it more difficult for him." Good. And he says, "You need some more diversity." He says, "So I'm going to bring in a new plant. This plant really, really works well. Autumn olive. Autumn olive, right? So we planted autumn olive, right? And it's quail habitat. It's not very friendly, okay?
Yeah.
Later on, we spent thousands of dollars trying to remove it.
Yeah.
In the 20 years later. So we also cut some trees and we made some brush, right? So we're doing pretty good, right? So 2 years later, I called Paul up and I said, "Paul, we don't have any quail. 0, right?" He goes, "You got to be kidding me." So he came back and he made another 2-year plan. It made no difference whatsoever. We don't farm here for a cash crop. Our cash crop is the healthy ecological attitude of our membership, right? We do it about as well as you can. You walk through our fields, we don't use herbicides and pesticides. There's thousands of grasshoppers that jump. What the hell is wrong? Why? And by the way, I'm a bird hunter, right? So my first bird look, I just hunted here in Montgomery County. German short-hair pointer. There were a few pheasants and a decent amount of quail. What happened? Now, all I can tell you is someone that is involved at a layman's level and a bird hunter, right?
Yeah.
What happened is no-till farming came in, herbicides and pesticides use came in, and bulldozers came in. So we got rid of a lot of the cover. But what about our farm? You know, we have a 624 acre farm now. In those days, it was 366. What happened? We did it right. Wildlife don't care. Predators don't care about boundary lines, right? So if all your neighbors are performing this type of habitat and you're a dinner plate, you're like a diner, right? And that's exactly what happened. And there's not a quail on this property. Unless, you know, we have an area for training bird dogs and you might find one surviving for a short period of time. But
yeah.
In McKee-Besters, they have field trials, they bring in thousands of quail. Within 3 weeks, they're all dead.
Yeah.
So I don't want to put water on your plan, but
I hear you.
it's hotter than you think.
When I started working on this, I thought, is this a bad idea? Are quail doomed, right? Is this a bad idea to hitch my wagon to this effort? Maybe. Maybe they'll all go. But we're seeing some responses. On the Eastern Shore, I know 2 farmers. We did timber harvests. They got quail in different areas. I'm going to try. I'm going to try.
Well,
and like you said, I think one thing that happened is that you can't have an island. Like you need to have, and that's why I talk about this large landscape scale issue. We can get hay farmers to do a little bit of something, get the forest owners to do a little bit of something, do crop owners do a little bit of something. You need connectivity because one storm event, the way wildlife populations survive is you might have a die-off in a certain area, but they get repopulated. But when you're an island and you have a die-off,
Let's see what happens to it.
you're done. Everything's gone. So it's like living on an island, and it's very difficult to maintain a population in that environment. So, but I know we are way behind schedule, and I know my good friend Kyle is coming up here next. He's going to talk about